This is our session that starts what I like to call the, I don't want to call it aggressive, but spirited part of our program. We're going to go from BAS Selling 101. Then I think we've got another one. Then we're going to IP versus MSTP, the great debate. So I've got a panel up here, 5 people. You're wondering why there's 5 people. We've got an hour and a half to talk about this. So one thing I want to make sure is that this ends up being conversational. You guys can ask questions during the presentation if you like. And I want to make sure that you walk away with some very, very good takeaways when it comes to selling BAS, because you know that BAS has become more and more technical over the years. Now we've got IP devices, now there's cybersecurity concerns, and there's a lot of things that make it a little different from how you sold BAS 10 years ago. So I've got a panel of 5 people here. I'm gonna start down here with Chris. Want to introduce yourself? Let's go all the way down one at a time.
Sure, good morning.
Who you are, where you work, what you do, all that good stuff.
Bobrovski. I am the district sales manager for Belimo. I cover Michigan, Northwest Ohio. August will be 5 years with Belimo. Prior to that, I worked for an energy savings company. We partnered with school districts and universities in a shared savings model, all based off of consumption reduction and a non-capital design. And so that's my background in the industry. And actually, prior to that, I was a middle school teacher for 7 years. So
nice.
Tangled webs.
Before I move to Amy, by a show of hands, how many integrators do we have here? How many end users? How many consultant engineers? How many distributors / manufacturers? There you go. Nice. Okay, Amy, introduce yourself, please.
My name's Amy Kelly. I am the general manager of Haynes Mechanical, and I have about 18 years of building automation experience, starting with Long Building Technologies in Denver, on the technical side mostly.
Thank you.
I'm Chris Kulbago. I'm running our critical and validated environments group at Rovisys. I've been doing that for about 13 or so years. So we focus primarily on food and beverage and life sciences customers in the large tier manufacturing realm.
My name is Marc Petock. I am the Vice President, Chief Marketing Communication Officer for Lynxspring. Prior to that, I was, along with my colleague here, one of the old guards at Tridium, and many of you, I think I recognize from you. And also, I am one of the original founders of Project Haystack for data.
Hi, I'm Ed Merwin with Tridium. 25 years at Tridium so far, and 25 before that at Honeywell and Branch and doing a lot of things. So I've been a seller all of my life, basically. So I had different titles, but damn proud to be a salesman.
Wow,
salesperson, how about that?
There you go. So we've got a wealth of knowledge up here for you guys. Let's start with you, Ed. What's your elevator pitch? Give me your elevator pitch when you're talking to an owner that's non-technical about the value of BAS.
I tell them that we use technology to keep their building comfortable, to keep it optimized, and to keep it safe. And then I say, and then we use technology to do that, right? But the outcome is really safety, comfort, and optimization or cost savings. And leave it at that, and then wait for them to ask questions.
There you go. How about you, Marc?
Again, I think it really depends today on the audience who you're on that elevator with. So you ask building owner and operator, and I really talk about is outcomes, operational efficiency, and financial performance, and their business, or bring that part into it. I don't really talk about the technology yet. To me, technology is the enabler to achieve all these others. If it's an integrator, it's a different story, or if it's a MEP or consultant. So where I'm going with bottom line is there's not one centralized elevator pitch anymore.
How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'd agree with what Marc said there. I think ultimately, depends on who you're talking to. I also think that, if we can talk about it in terms of just fundamental basics, BAS is just the brain of your entire facility, from HVAC and lighting. And honestly, if you just think about the United States domestically, buildings use 40% of the energy and 75% of the electricity. So if we're talking about what are the cost saving values and factors that we can provide value with, I would start with BAS just because it's the most simplistic and the easiest to attack in most cases.
Want to take a shot at it, Amy?
I agree with Chris. You know, it's the brain of your building, but for the most part, I don't have an elevator pitch. I really dive into asking questions and discovering what the customer pain points are.
Chris?
I would echo, a lot of that. It's something that, when delivered best, is completely invisible. Out of sight, out of mind when folks are entirely comfortable, and hopefully you get on that elevator and you're talking about the weather outside and not inside.
Right.
And we deliver that service to our end users. And as Amy mentioned, understanding what their pain points are and how we can kind of broker solutions for them becomes a big part of that.
So Marc, when you're selling BAS, and I'm going to ask you, Marc, because I know you've been around for a minute or two, what are some of the biggest challenges that you find when selling BAS to people who are non-technical?
Well, I think that's an important thing. As I've seen the industry change over the years for the better, is that it's not about the technology anymore. The conversation, again, I mentioned earlier, technology is the enabler. It's the business side now that is just as important in having this conversation. And so I think technology in my world now is second. Business is first and foremost. And I've seen that conversation change, especially with building owners and operators. They've been inundated with technology, and at this point in time, they all believe somebody's technology is going to work, generally. And so it's more about that business. And that to me is where everything starts today and ends. It's about outcomes, identifying what outcomes your technology, your solutions are going to drive, achieve.
Yeah, I know all of you have different experiences. How about you, Chris Kulbago?
So I think when we start thinking about BAS from a differentiation perspective, you have to look at it at the way that it's procured. And for a very long time, BAS was just temperature control, right? So when we look at BAS as more than just the typical ATC or temperature control platform, it's no longer an add-on, right? It's no longer something you're buying with your air handlers or your central plant or your chillers, and owners and operators and end users are getting more familiar with the software and understanding how they can not only operate their facilities, but maintain their facilities long-term.
Yeah. How about you, Amy? What challenges have you run into?
I mean, I think for the most part, your buyers are not technical individuals, so you really have to dive into what their business need is, what pain points they're experiencing, how my technical solution can help drive their business goals going forward, and making sure that they have budget in place, because most of the time in a retrofit situation, you run into a buyer who doesn't necessarily have the budget in place and has a reactive situation going on.
Well, Chris, let me ask you this. What do you use as a differentiator when it comes to BAS selling, right? Because there's a lot of products that are out there.
Sure.
You know, I used to say this when it comes to the mechanical side. Every air handler can make hot and cold air. Every chiller can make cold water, right? We're in the people business. What do you think are some of the differentiators that can be used when you're talking to customers on a business side? Yeah,
for Belimo, I mean, we're in a position where we're the Kleenex, of the industry.
Right, a brand. Right.
And so it becomes less about the product and more about the reputation and the people that are behind that. My colleagues, in the room that all stand behind it and we show up. We know we're not going to be the cheapest valve actuator sensor, but the total cost of ownership is something I try to highlight, and the services that are provided at no cost, whether that's to our end users, whether that's to our partners at engineering firms, our controls contractors, you name it, right? So we try to be there for all parties as a resource to make sure that we stay in the traffic and that we are bringing solutions and trying to get our owners to understand the value of that and see us as kind of those trusted partners and helping make decisions around their systems. Yeah, how about you, Ed? Because I know you work for Honeywell, you work for Tridium, and with Niagara and Tridium being one of those flagship products, what would you use as a strategy to differentiate yourself from the rest?
Well, first of
from
all,
a strategic standpoint?
yeah, we're looking at this, it's one customer, but it's many stakeholders.
Yes.
And I think the biggest mistake that I see, and I'm doing a little blocking and tackling here.
Yeah, no, please.
Is that, when you go in to see a customer, the CFO really doesn't care about Niagara, right?
Right.
He does care that, you know what, there's a lot of people using Niagara and it's going to affect my bottom line. Right. But then you got to go to somebody in the boiler room. What do they really care about? What do I bring, or my technologies, not just Niagara, but what do I bring as a system integrator or a supplier? So that you have to think about that, because there's multiple people make buying decisions.
Connecting
right?
the dots.
And connect the dots. So I think that the key is to do some homework, right? And study who those personas are, who you're working with. And I think that's the most important thing to do today to differentiate yourself, is that you walk in and you can connect with the CFO, you can connect with the energy manager, the sustainability manager, which is a key point now. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to, as somebody selling yourself and your company, you have to make sure that you appeal to all those different stakeholders.
You can speak the language.
Speak the language of each, do your research, go on Google, find out who they worked for before. Sometimes you don't get the sustainability gentleman that was here before, what his background was. Well, you can find that on LinkedIn now, and you can study and be prepared to do that. So I think that's the best way to help differentiate by learning your customer first, and then figure out what you have to do to pitch.
Chris.
Just to echo that,
please go ahead.
is that to me, it for y'all, is one of the takeaways. That to me right there is probably at the top of the list, is the decision making today is across the board. It's not one person you go in. It's not the facility manager. It used to be. It is that whole C-suite. And to your point, the CFO does not care that it's Niagara or somebody else's technology. What they care about is the outcomes that this investment on our part as a company is going to produce. And then same with a COO or whomever that is. And then ultimately they are looking for long-term and scalability. And again, no matter what that person's title is, that's got to be communicated, and that's part of the value prop, along with some of the intangible value props that need to be shared.
Yeah, I call it the squeeze from the top down and the bottom up.
Correct.
Right, to make sure you connect all those dots. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chris, how about you?
I think that, just to piggyback off of what Marc said, I think that when you understand the way that BAS has been procured, and I know I mentioned this in my last answer, but the way that it's been procured forever is just an add-on, or it's been like a checkbox, and it's been something that has just been consistently procured the exact same way for so long. Now we can go at it from like an agnostic approach. Instead of trying to shoehorn one solution in that's just kind of always been the same, we can start talking to end users about the way that we can come in with like different manufacturers or different instruments or different softwares and kind of layer in a custom solution, which we have the benefit of doing with Rovisys at our agnostic approach. Shout out Rovisys. And then the other thing that we do when we go to market from just a delivery perspective, should we be fortunate enough to actually win that sale, is we've taken a lot of pride in not having disparate field teams and engineering teams. So when we can maintain the same delivery strategy, customers see that they're not only dedicated, but they're getting what they wanted, and we get a lot of repeat business that way.
Yeah. So Amy, you mentioned a couple of times identifying the customer's pain points, right? Give me an example, if you can, without giving names, of a time where you understood the customer's business and their end goals, and it helped you to close a project. Like
Absolutely.
A mini case study.
Yeah.
Yeah, take as long as you like.
Recently, we had a Class A building in downtown Denver that had an 8-year-old BAS system, but they were experiencing multiple VAV actuator failures. So they had been, break fixing most of their VAVs within the space, which was creating a lot of comfort issues for the tenants. In Class A space, you have high-profile tenants. People were complaining, they were upset, they didn't like the way that the system was working. So we dove into that pain point, and we were able to say, like, if you were to lose this many lease agreements, what does that cost this Class A building? And within that, we were able to sell a full retrofit to them on a relatively new system, but helping them get to their business goals of keeping clients happy and within the building.
So did that start from the C-suite, or did that start from facilities or a business
Started with
manager?
facilities, but we had to go all the way to the top to make that happen. You can't just, you have to sell at multiple levels of the organization. You can influence Boiler Bob, as we say, and then you have to get all the way up to the top.
Right. No, I understand. So there's a term I like to throw around quite a bit. It's called trusted advisor, right? I want to be your trusted advisor for all things OT. Pick up the phone and give me a call so that if there's a solution that I have, I'll provide it. But I certainly know someone in the industry who can provide it, but I want to be the point person, right? The trusted advisor. Give me an example when you guys use that approach, because I'm sure all of you have, because I hear you talking about strategic selling, right? There's selling and there's strategic selling. Order taking, strategic selling. Strategic selling is typically more long-term, right? So, Chris, give me an example. I see you nodding your head, so I know you've got something.
I've got a very recent
right?
example of this. So we have a long-term process control customer, and that's been a manufacturer in upstate New York forever. And they called our process control group and said, we have a whole bunch of problems with this existing platform we have for our building automation. And we got involved and ended up talking through various levels of their organization, from facilities, who was dealing with a whole bunch of downtime and paid upgrades and paid sales efforts even, to upgrade a system that they had had forever. And we got all the way to the C-suite to be able to talk about, like, this is what it's costing you on a recurring basis, on an annual basis, and your system's still not functional. So how can we get out of this mindset? So we were able to sell them actually, Dan Williams, shout out. I don't know if he's in here, but he helped us sell a large-scale 77-building retrofit with Tridium to be able to slowly migrate their existing proprietary platform into an open integration solution, and that's actually ongoing today.
Wow. So how did you guys qualify that opportunity?
Yeah.
From the beginning stages, right?
Yeah, so it starts with just understanding what the customer's complaints are, right? Their pain points, understanding what their goals are, understanding what they have today, and then not only that, but talking with all of the folks that are looking at or touching this system, right? You have an operations team, you have a maintenance team, you have the folks that are paying for it, you have an engineering team, and all of those different stakeholders, I suppose. And then understanding that we can put a solution together to be able to not only save them cost on the CapEx side, but also on the OpEx side when things are just going to function longer.
Nice. So this question is for Ed and Marc here, because you guys have been doing it the longest. How do you get?
And we're still here. Come on, you know.
So how do you guys, just from a 3,000-foot level, a very basic level, how do you guys qualify a potentially large BAS opportunity, right? Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in.
Rock, paper, scissors, you know? Come on.
I think you just have to look at where your strengths are. You have to keep an eye on things, right? One thing I learned, I became very successful, I think, because I learned how to use Google before anybody else did. So I'm serious. When it first came out, and by the way, I was around when PCs first came out, laptops, so and cell phones too, for that matter. So, but that being said, the first thing I started doing, I said, this Google stuff is really cool, and I can do a lot of research, and I can build, and find out what's going on. We were talking today about some new data centers that are being built in the area of Dallas, right, in Arlington, and where I live in North Texas, and just by following the news. So I think you just have to make sure that you're constantly keeping the pulse on what you're doing. Right now, data centers, everybody knows they're crazy. Yep. It's really good, but you never know that there could be another manufacturing plant. I mean, when we first, Lego is building their first major factory in the U.S. in Richmond, Virginia. Well, that got talked about 4 or 5 years ago, and people got wind of it. And fortunately, we were able to make that connection with the folks at Lego. We had some great relationships in Europe, and now the Lego factory is going to be a very nice Niagara-based system. But it's with a lot of other things, PLCs and all these other systems and chillers and all that sort of thing.
But that was a long-term strategic sale.
Long-term strategic sale, but it was keeping an eye on the market and what's going on. Certain markets, data centers are just prolific. And I got to say, sometimes you have to watch the leads that come in. We have a lead management system, and leads come in, and I still to this day look at every single one that comes in, looking for a trend, okay? I'm seeing what's going on with school districts, right? Or what area of the country are these leads coming in where people have some of the same problems? So you really have to take some time to learn. And if you look at people like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, they'll tell you they spend so much of their time reading what's going on. That's why they're successful, because they set aside time to do that.
Market analysis.
And I have done that religiously myself. I always set aside time to find out what's going on. Something will interest me with a new weird lead, and I'll say, I got to understand what's going on with that particular business. So that's just
Mark,
some
you want to add a
advice.
little color to that?
Sure, and I'll try to put this in a real life use case history. So we found out that a major financial client was looking, we'll just leave it general. So stealthily, we found out who the folks are, C-suite to C-level, all the way down to facility management. Now, when you think of a financial institution, there's multiple places that they need technology to run their buildings better, more efficient. There's a retail side of it. In this particular case, there was retail, 6,500 retail locations. There's a regional administration offices. I forget the number. Anyway, and then there's the data center part, there's the corporate headquarters, there's all of that. So the way we approach that is we did industry research to find out what is the challenge in the retail space for a bank or a financial institution? What is it in a data center? There's some commonality, but there's some uniqueness. So what we did was we approached it that way. One platform, which we've adopted the saying, one platform, many possibilities. And that's how we approached it. The retail side was completely different than an admin building or whatever the case is. The outcomes were different, the needs set. The one common was that one centralized platform. In this case, it was Niagara. And also looking at the use cases, especially, I'll give you two quick examples. So for the retail is, we said the platform, Niagara, we can connect security cameras. But we, as Lynxspring, we're not interested in the security aspect of it. That's not our cup of tea. We don't want that. That's other experts out there. But we want to put a couple security cameras out on the front and the back. And they go, why? I said, well, during hard climate things when it's snowing, you pay a firm to go and clear your sidewalks, you clear your parking lot, and you have an SLA with them, right? Yeah, it's got to be cleared by X time. These cameras will tell you that if they're holding true that the sidewalks in the parking lot was cleared by 7 a.m. This is your proof that it is, and it's all part of the central system. Then also on the administration are the buildings, office buildings. Back then, hoteling, you guys know what I mean when I say hoteling, you reserve your room or whatever. Very big, still is. And we got to a point where Ed will go in and reserve a room. He goes in there, drops his stuff off on the table, the chair. Ed doesn't come back until 5 o'clock. So basically, it's an expensive place to store Ed's gear. So what we did is we put sensors in the room and sensors under the chairs. And we could tell how long Ed used that room, when and where. Now, look at that over 35 buildings in which this particular client had. We got all the data, we benchmarked it, and we were able to say, by doing this, no one's using these hotel rooms on a full-time basis or most time. We can close certain amount of hoteling things in your buildings. So they close based on the data just from looking at the person's tail, sitting in a chair or on the wall, that we closed 4 buildings in which they were able to save all of that lease payment for those buildings, completely closed them down and consolidated it. So that's outcomes, by the way, business outcomes.
Right.
So it's the bottom line is, sorry, and I know I'm going, I get wound up and I can't stop, sorry. And it's being old, that's a privilege now because, anyway.
Being a good salesperson.
Yeah. And And I think that's where you've got to find that out. What are some unusual things that you can take your base technology, your base solution, and enhance it with these additional values that Ed's coming in there and selling against me does not even thinking about that.
And it goes back to that whole trusted advisor thing,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So let me ask this. So you guys are selling these solutions, you're coming up with all these really cool ideas. Usually that's a longer sales cycle, right? And I want to pose this to Chris and Amy first. What kind of strategies or tactics do you guys use to try to shorten that sales cycle, right? A strategic sale can sometimes be between 12 and 18 months, we like to say. What do you guys do to try to shorten that sales cycle? Or do you? I know I have.
I'll go. So I don't know that, shortening it, it's always great to shorten it if you can. Thankfully, we're given the bandwidth to work a really long sales cycle and to approach things from a multitude of angles. So as an example, yesterday, we were at the DTE Energy Conference. I see a lot of familiar faces that were also in attendance yesterday, and getting to talking with individuals from DTE and from Leidos and from all over the place, and talking about Belimo products specifically that we would love to see get to a prescriptive rebate measure, specifically our energy valve, right? And so we have no grand illusions of that being a short sales cycle.
Right.
But we understand that if we put in the time now and invest and let that snowball pick up some steam headed downhill, that it could really grow into a monster for us. So I don't really try to shorten it. I think in terms of becoming a trusted advisor, the amount of credibility I gain when I downsell somebody, when I say, well, we have a less expensive solution that might do just as good for you in your particular application, that earns you a lot of credibility with your customer base, and people tend to reach out to you. If you've put our stuff in for years, you'll know that our flange globe bells face-to-face are different than Johnson or Siemens are. And so people come to us and say, hey, I want to replace this with a Belimo. And I'm like, that might not be, we can retrofit it, we can put a new actuator on top, but if you want a new valve without the mechanical work, you might want to look somewhere else.
Right.
And people are like, wow, you just
turned down the
actively
sale.
Down,
Right?
just gave away a sale. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do what's best for you because I want you to come back to me.
That's all part of being a trusted
So,
advisor,
yeah.
right? So Amy, have you ever come into a situation where you had to figure out how to shorten the sales cycle for whatever reason, whether it was your compensation plan, bonuses at the end of the year, or whatever? You just wanted to shorten that sales cycle.
I think if you can quantify the impact of the business problem, you can shorten the sales cycle, right? Like if you have a food manufacturer, if they have downtime that costs them $100,000 an evening, and you can quantify that problem, you can reduce the sales cycle. And then along with tools that we use, we have an estimating software that seems to pick up our bandwidth quite a bit. So my sales team can be out there selling and actually building relationships with clients while we have the back of the house, whipping out quotes.
Right. No, I like it. I love it. So Chris Kulbago, how do you handle objections, right? So when you guys, and I'm talking about objections when it comes to cost, right? How do you guys handle that when it comes to selling BAS and some of the solutions that you guys sell, whether it's coming from the C-suite or from, facilities who has a budget, whether it's their operating budget or their capital budget? How do you guys handle those objectives and pivot?
I think the best way to handle it is just upfront conversation, which I'm sure isn't shocking to anyone sitting in this room. But if it comes down to being a budget-conscious customer in this situation, or the solution that we've provided isn't going to meet their budget, I think we would start smaller, right? So maybe we can provide something as a pilot, or we can try to prove that this has longevity down the line. The other thing that we can do is kind of talk about, if we're talking about a retrofit situation, what are you spending today? Like, what is your OpEx to keep this thing running, as opposed to, hey, let's put a new one in. The CapEx is higher, but the next 5 years, your OpEx is going to be significantly lower.
ROI.
I would say that's probably the easiest answer to that question, which could be very long-winded, so I'll cut it there.
Yeah. So for you, Ed, just kind of piggybacking off of that, how many times do you feel you have to, and not as far as a number, but how often do you feel you have to talk about ROI and talk about the business case when it comes to deploying technology?
I'm lousy at ROI, right?
Most of us
I hate
are.
it. I hate the finance side of it, so somebody else does that. I'm being truly honest with you.
No,
What I
absolutely.
focus on is trying to explain to somebody, like Marc brought up a bank, and I'll talk about another bank we did. They would talk a little bit about the cost, and then we said, what does a truck roll cost? Branch managers can't figure the thermostat out. What do? They call the local service contractor, and you got a $250 truck roll. So when you figure out, and when you figure a couple of those a month, times 12 months, times 1,000 branches, that adds up. So yeah, if somebody's going to do the financial stuff, I'm walking in with somebody else who's already done that math. I'll be real honest with you. I'm there to speak stories about this is what we saved at another location.
Yeah.
I tend to use a lot of case studies or parables, we used to call them. That was the old school name to talk the stories, so that if I'm in an industrial environment, I say, well, you know, we say we're talking to Ford, you might bring up a story that you used with another automobile manufacturer. If you're talking with somebody who's doing light manufacturing, you try to think about another project where you did and the success that you had and convey that success. And hopefully you can give them a phone number to call somebody that says, you know, this is what they did.
As a reference.
So I do believe some people are cost sensitive. I'll say one story, and I learned this very early on. I was a brand new salesperson. We were using flip charts, by the way, and we did all these flip charts for this owner. And
You're that old?
I am that old. I didn't do my homework as much as I should have. I went in there to present a Honeywell Delta 1000 system, which is real old. And as soon as I started talking, the construction manager walked up to my flip chart, picked it up, went to the very back where I had written the price down. And I'm like, wow. He said, that's too high. And I'm like, uh-oh.
So how did you pivot?
I'm like, boy, the bottom line was, he just cared about cost. He did not care, and he owned the purse. And it didn't matter, as long as the building ran and they were going to get an occupancy permit, he did not care. And I should have done that going in when he walked to that. So I tried to talk around it a little bit, do this, that, and the other, but he ended up buying a much cheaper system with a lot less cost. I would suggest to you that I guess our partners that we went in with, we were kind of flabbergasted, and we should have known that. So lost the sale.
Right.
So that's the kind of things that you do have to focus on. Really, what are they really looking for at that time? And like I said,
yeah. It goes back to qualifying the opportunity.
Qualifying the opportunity better. The financial ROI, again, operational costs, people, I believe in energy costs, don't get me wrong. But let me tell you, operational costs are much higher than energy costs.
And all organizations
and that's what
are
we
different.
try to focus on is what does it cost you per hour to do something? I saw an article today, every data center, the average downtime per minute is $9,000 a minute, right? Well, that's when you try to qualify, what is the downtime for a branch bank? They have to shut the doors or if they have customers that are mad, those types of things. So, yeah.
So let me start down here. And this question is going to be for each one of you, right? I want to start with you, Chris. What is your approach? How different is your approach from new construction, right, to retrofits? Yeah.
That's a great question, especially on the valve actuator sensor side of stuff, from the Belimo perspective. New construction versus retrofit is two completely different, obviously, worlds. New construction, we track projects and we dedicate a lot of resources to getting to owners, to getting, in front of engineering firms, making sure they're aware of the latest and greatest from Belimo. And then obviously our partnerships at the distribution, controls contractor levels, all that is really important from a retrofit standpoint. A lot of that is the same, but knowing the type of solution that they're looking for, what the existing systems are, becomes significant. And then I think Amy was discussing it earlier, like just understanding your customer, getting to know their needs, right? And so maybe we'll say interviewing them to understand what's really driving them. Are they just retrofitting it to sell? In which case,
that's a good point. Very good.
Might not want a thorough solution, or are they holding on to it long term? The total cost of ownership, is that a bigger priority for them? And so we'll lay out objectively different solutions and say you can go in any one of these directions, on our front, and here are the costs associated with it. My brother's a carpenter, and he has this adage. He's finished carpentry. He's like, "Do you want it done right, or do you want it done fast?"
Right.
Sometimes the answer is fast, right? Because it just needs to get up and operational for somebody to flip a property or turn something open or sell it. But if you're going to be there for the long haul, it's a different it's a different conversation you have with that owner, with that investor when they care about the functionality and the performance.
So you try to provide multiple solutions,
Yeah.
good, better, best.
Exactly.
Right?
We can Band-Aid, we can replace like for like, or we can take it to the next level with performance devices.
Yeah. How about you, Amy? Difference between you selling new construction and retrofits.
I agree with Chris. I live in the retrofit world, so being a trusted advisor, understanding the client, the business that they have, their business goals, what pain points they're experiencing, helps drive a retrofit opportunity. New construction, getting to understand your design engineers, partnering with mechanical contractors and GCs, making sure that you have a partnership on that side. But from my experience, new construction is more of a CYA and less of a business partnership.
Right. Plan and spec. Good old plan and spec. How about you, Chris?
I think I have a unique answer to this one because we don't live in the plan and spec space as much. So I'll talk a little bit about the DB side of it, or the value add side. So from a new construction perspective, we're doing a lot of work with clean slate, brand new general contractor based proposals, right? So we're doing sales opportunities or putting solutions together that are being run through a general contractor or a mechanical contractor. Those folks don't care about your software. They don't. They just want to know what the price is, and they want to be able to mark it up 5% and hand it to the end user. So what we do, and what makes it a little unique for us, is that our strategy changes from, instead of selling the product, we're actually trying to sell the solution to someone else. So we're trying to sell it to the engineer of record, or we're trying to sell it directly to the end user. So the strategy on that is unique compared to a retrofit, in which case we're going to talk more about what are the pain points, right? What are your goals from retrofitting this facility? And in addition to that, how can we do it in the least intrusive process that we can, right? I'm assuming if it's one of our large-scale customers, downtime is probably not an option. So we have to come up with a roadmap. We have to come up with a plan. We have to come up with a fail-safe strategy. If during cutover things don't go well, we have to come up with a whole bunch of different plans. So I'd say just all the way around, they're definitely unique. I don't prefer one or the other.
How about you, Marc?
Again, as that trusted advisor, my colleagues have said it, is really know what the intent is of what they're asking for, especially in a retrofit. We've got a saying that we've practiced over the years: embrace, not replace. We would rather embrace what we have. Now, again, there are going to be times where that is not going to be an option. All right, but I think from our perspective, we're going to look at that first and foremost in a retrofit. And some of the value, ask some of the value. All right, you've got this equipment, and most likely in a retrofit, nothing talks to one another. There's crappy connectivity, there's no integration, it's whatever. And most of these retrofits are older buildings that have not have the technology we all market and sell. And then one of the key questions I ask them is this: let's look at CapEx versus OpEx. If I can embrace what you already have, and we can get another 5 or 6 years out of your existing equipment, out of your rooftop units, out of your air handlers, out of that, versus you having to figure out money for a CapEx improvement, what makes sense to you? And I would have to say 90% of the time, they want that option where I can extend the lifetime value of the equipment I already have and prepare. So bottom line is, you look at that is helping them balance their CapEx, OpEx side of the house. And new construction, and I'll say this from a marketing perspective, today's environment, there are more opportunities for all of us in retrofit opportunities than there are new construction. Granted, there's new construction. We've heard data centers, these large logistic distribution centers, these massive buildings that you see, Amazon uses at Walmart, or this multi-tenanted. Those are opportunities, but the new construction market is just kind of flat. And so to generate revenue for all of our companies, it's retrofit.
Yeah. How about you, Ed? Want to take a stab at
fortunately,
that?
I get involved in a lot of longer term projects, whether they're retrofit or new. Take a hospital, healthcare.
Yep.
I've had a big organization come to me and say, look, we've got a lot of proprietary stuff here, but we just can't get rid of it. What do? We just can't afford this thing. So
Rip it all out, yeah.
you got to take them through the journey, right? So the first journey is, okay, let's take a look at what you have. What can we connect you right away to first add cybersecurity? You have, this customer had some older systems that they were exposed to the internet. They were not as secure as they should have been.
Right.
First, we got to fix that. We got to put a layer on top to fix that. And maybe we're going to talk server to server, and we're going to add a couple of unique things that we can do that the old server couldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, okay, once we get that in place, we're going to start, and we're going to eventually get rid of that server and go down to their older control panels, save the old panels, and do that. But then when you do a retrofit on the floor of a hospital, and the hospitals are always retrofitting, and that's really almost a new construction job, adding a wing, we're going to get rid of the old stuff, and this is what a new greenfield is going to look like. So you have to give them that vision. You have to start with where we're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And as he said, we have to take the bite of the elephant, right? And we have to say, what are we going to do and how we're going to take it there? So I'm fortunate enough to be in that part, usually in an earlier design stage, to be able to do that. As far as new construction goes, it's kind of the same thing. Hopefully, and one thing that I think any successful BS salesperson has to do, you have to embrace your customer set in the city. We used to say, if you worked in, I handled Virginia and the Richmond area a lot, you had to have 3 contractors you worked religiously with. You had to have 3 consulting engineers and 3 owners, okay? And that's about all you could really do. You know, that's 9 customers that you just are their pure person that they trust.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of building a franchise, right? So so you work a retrofit here, you work a new bid there, and in between you might do some plan and spec that can obviously get ugly and do those sort of things. But you kind of have to build your franchise to be able to do that, and you just can't do one thing. You can't just bid jobs and be an estimator. Yeah, and I'm glad you have estimators for that because that's good. Their expertise in that.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to be in front of the customer, building again that whole franchise for your particular area that you have.
Absolutely.
And that's where I'm starting to see with these new construction and retrofits really just kind of blurring the lines. In Texas, there's all these big, huge office buildings.
Mm-hmm.
They're being converted to mixed use.
Right.
Okay, so is that new construction? Is it a retrofit? It's a little bit of both. So I think you just have to embrace it. And the key is getting early in the process, because if you're just looking at the reports to bid a job, it's probably too late. You're probably just, you're going to get a percentage of those, and that's all you can count on.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because you mentioned the consulting engineers. A couple of you guys mentioned the engineers. How do you build that trust? Because there's a difference between the plan and spec world, the design assist world, right?
Yeah.
So how do you build that trust with the consulting engineers when it comes to selling BAS? Because most engineers know just enough to be dangerous, right?
It takes time. You can build some trust in a meeting because they understand you know what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay, that's one. But if you want long-term relationships, you've got to start, and you might come in and you're going to do some lunch and learns, because there might be somebody that's already doing a great job that they work with. They'll let you bid it, but you know what? They really like the person down the street, and they've been working with them for 10 years. So you just have to build that trust by servicing, giving them honest information, being responsive. The biggest issue I hear today, which really bothers me from consulting engineers, they can't get a response from anybody, whether it's an email or a phone call. Nobody will call them back and try to answer that. So I've been calling on consulting engineers for many years. So the fact that when people tell me, Ed, I trust your opinion, that's fulfilling, right? That means you've done your job, you've built that franchise. So that's what it is. Some engineers just want you to throw a spec at them and be done with it. Okay, that's fine too. That's great. We have specs we can ship out and do that. But I really enjoy it when very successfully, but it takes 2 years. You could be working on a project for 2 years. It's great when you finally get the PO, but you got to expect that to happen. And everybody here are great companies that have built those types of relationships. And but again, it's just being responsive. And the consulting community, it's a tough job now. We heard that today from Newcomb and Boyd. You've got to sit there and you do your MEP spec, but then what about the cyber side? You got to design the cyber side, but who's overlooking that? We don't have a real good guide spec for cyber, right? Or there's not even a spec section that does that yet. So it's going to become very complex. Some people will say, well, don't invest your time calling on consultants, but I think I totally disagree with that.
Yes,
I think in the long run, if you're going to be successful, you have to have good relationships with key people and pick your team you want to work with. And maybe they do the kind of work that you want to do with, but I still think you have to do that. Don't let anybody tell you don't waste your time calling on consultants.
Yeah.
And to add to that is the owners and operators today are more educated about the technologies and the solutions than they ever have been before. So as they are meeting with their MEP or whatever, they may be talking about digital transformation or this, that, and the other. And if these MEPs are not up to speed on the latest and the greatest, then chances are they are not going to win that particular project. So the old, and I love this, is that, oh, yeah, I'm going to spec this. Oh, here's something for 1980. Boom, it's in there, we're done. Okay, next, let's move on. That, to me, is a dying piece in the MEP world now, is that they are expected to know open. They're expected to know cybersecurity. They're expected to know interoperability, data interoperability, and how they're going to add to the project.
Right. That's one of the reasons that at Cochrane we have our smart building design website. That's for consulting engineers that has systems integration drawings, guide specs, and a whole lot of other information to help consultants out. Chris, I know that you guys spend a lot of time calling on consulting engineers. You and I have talked about that. Belimo specifications are on our website.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about how you approach the consulting engineering community.
I think much of the same way, just again, being a trusted advisor partner for them goes a long way, offering the lunch and learns and the continuing or the PDH credits, and for them to call on you when they need something. I mean, they're having to specify a wide range of things for a specific project. And I talked to a lot of folks about it. Like, Belimo, in the grand scheme of things, we are
A blip.
Yeah, we're
Right.
a blip. We're an inch wide, but we need to be that mile deep, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so for them to be able to call on us and say, "Hey, I've got this application," and if I don't have the answer, again, very fortunate that Belimo supports us with applications consultants, with product managers, with technical support for people who, instead of going the inch wide and the mile deep, they go 3 miles deep.
Wow.
They know it.
Yeah.
They know it. And we've got a lab and all that stuff. So just, leaning on the reputation and providing the resources to those individuals is, I think, how we add the value to them.
Chris, I know you guys do some design assist. Most of it is design build, but when you're working with engineers, how do you develop that trust?
Yeah, I think it ultimately comes down to just how much can you help the engineer, right? I think in a lot of ways, a lot of engineering companies that we're running into right now are short-staffed. They're slammed. They're working on dozens of projects all at once, and they all have short time frames. So in a design build scenario, we're actually going to offer to an engineer, like, hey, we'll help you with this. Like, we'll do it for free. Like, allow us to help you write this spec, or allow us to help you come up with a SCADA package, or I don't know, some sort of retrofit plan that's going to go into your RFP that we're actually going to put on the street that others are going to compete against us on. I think that's probably the easiest way to just get the conversation started. And then, sure, we can educate via lunch and learns, and those things are great, and they've been going on forever, and I don't need to talk about those things. But I think just education of the new things out there, because I can't possibly expect a consulting engineer or an engineer of record to know everything. Like, that is remarkably unfair to them.
Right. Well, and I started off in the consulting engineering community. And I remember one of the first things my first boss told me when I was green out of college, he said, your vendors are your most important tool. Make sure you call on your vendors, get them to come in and talk to you about how to size a boiler, right? How to size an expansion tank for a boiler system, right? So we know how important vendors are. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, cybersecurity. We're not gonna dive deep into it, but when it comes to selling BAS, and I'll start here with you, Ed. When it comes to selling BAS, how much do you guys even talk about cybersecurity? Do you talk about it from a 3,000-foot level? Do you guys dig into it and talk about your products being secure by design and what you guys are doing for cybersecurity? Like, what do you guys do?
It's a key message. Even when I do something very broad for a customer, what Tridium does, there's more slides in there about cybersecurity than anything else.
Wow.
Okay, and the reason we do that is because it's the starting point. Look, I've learned a lot about cybersecurity. I will tell you, and some of the slides I did working with you to do some presentations. The largest part of our R&D budget is cybersecurity. I mean, you take these little line items, cybersecurity is the biggest piece, okay? And so we point that out. that we sweat the details, and we tell people, look, so you don't have to be an expert at it, but you have to understand what the issues are. You have to understand terms like secure by default,
Right.
and also don't be afraid to say, I really don't know. But in our office, we have somebody that does that.
Absolutely.
Right?
I've got a
So,
team.
so that's what we do. So I'm very fortunate in that we get some very high-level cyber people that visit our offices, and we have very high-level people that can talk with them, and they can sit there and work the details out. So it's really, connecting people together. But as an industry, I think we certainly, I have an ASHRAE deck that I've used with ASHRAE where I talk about that, and we just aren't doing enough of that. When you go to an ASHRAE meeting, there's very few ASHRAE meetings where somebody talks about cybersecurity, right? They want to talk about boilers, and they want to talk about this, and they want to talk about that. Well, I was the first one there that year that even mentioned cybersecurity.
It's the elephant in the room.
So that's, it's really something that we have to understand, and again, understand your company's policies. And I would be very concerned if somebody said, Ed, write me a cybersecurity spec. I'd sit there, I can't do that, but we can talk about the products and get about 4 or 5 people in the room to write a cybersecurity spec.
Exactly.
So
Chris Kulbago, you guys deploy a lot of different solutions for a lot of high-end customers who require cyber as being a part of the fabric of that deployment, right? How do you guys address cybersecurity?
Yeah, so it's got to be built into our solution up front. I think that's the easiest way to describe it. So when we get into the opportunity to actually review or discuss a proposal, we want the IT/OT folks in the room. We don't want to just deal with the procurement guy, or we don't want to deal with the operations staff, right? Because everyone knows the biggest roadblock down the line of your actual install is always going to be IT. So how can we get that out of the way early? We want to get them involved up front. Here are the architectures we came up with. Here are the NIST standards and the ISA standards that we're meeting. Here's the opportunity that you have to ask questions about what we're putting in, and we can go through all of the pre-qual to make sure that what we're delivering is going to meet all your standards.
How intense are those meetings? How much pushback do you guys get?
They're brutal. It depends on who it is, really. So in a lot of cases, we're not the first control system that's in the building, but if we are, we had a hospital down in North Carolina, and I don't even remember the questions that they were asking about the GA. So they were questions I didn't even know. Like, I'd never seen them before. Pieces of different
Like, what the
Java
heck
that I
is
was
that?
like, yeah, I need someone at Cochrane to help me with this. Like, I don't even know what this means.
Right. But you guys are finding that it's starting to, that conversation is starting to elevate, right? More and more.
Yeah, I'll just add, from a field device standpoint, we now are introducing gateways for cybersecurity threats. Every single device that that's out there.
Right, your
So
energy
Belimo
valve is an
has to
IP
be-
device, right?
Correct. Yeah, we have several IP based devices. In addition to, we're incorporating near field communication into more and more stuff. So cybersecurity is a big conversation in terms of product development, especially in the data center world.
Right.
We've had a lot of internal discussions, and we've come to the conclusion that we need to offer products. We offer near field communication on more and more of our stuff, but we also have to have a way of permanently disabling it should a customer choose to not want it, right? And so just another instance of having to listen to and understand how your device fits into a larger scheme and making sure that you don't become the point of vulnerability. And we probably all remember the Target HVAC issue from maybe a decade ago where they got in through a rooftop unit or something wild like that. I don't know the details, but
it does.
Yeah.
It changes.
Yeah,
It changes.
exactly.
But it never died. That is the key.
Yeah.
It was through the billing
That's it.
system. Yeah.
So we're conscious of that, and we try to make sure BACnet over SE and being able to disable the near field communication should it be requested are considerations that are being.
Mark, any color you want to add?
Yeah, so I think we've got the technology manufacturers, whether hardware, software. We have the system integration group. We have the MEPs design group. And we have the building owners, operators, the folks who are actually going to pay for something. It's not one person's responsibility. It's a shared responsibility. And to me, if we're out selling solutions, if we don't be proactive and bring that up, shame on us.
Yeah.
And then also, as a manufacturer, we've taken cyber seriously, just like others here and things like that. We've put our stuff through, and Paul, are you still in here? He mentioned it earlier. What are the manufacturers doing? We've been through RMF accreditation. We're finishing up FedRAMP from the government, since we do a lot of government. UL, all this other stuff that we put our stuff through, and if we find something, we correct it. And I'm not going to say we're 100% perfect. We're pretty darn good, because we take security by design, zero trust, all of that, what we've talked about. But the bottom line is, it's everybody's responsibility. And I know in RFIs that I get and I see, I'm seeing more and more cybersecurity elements of that. And one that just finished, it was 52 pages long on cyber only. I was gonna say, I almost called you. Hey, but anyway, so there you go.
Nice. So let's go back to the traditional selling of BAS systems, right? So Amy, this is for you. How often do you use like demos, site visits, pilot projects, and things like that to sell to a customer, right?
Yeah, I mean, site visits, we use that quite often. We'll bring in the technical team, the engineering team, make sure that we're on the right path. But for, demos, pilot programs, not so much. I feel like you haven't shown the ROI, you haven't quantified the problem, and no demo is going to help you sell at that point.
How about you, Chris?
Chris Kulbago. Yep, got it. Sorry. Demo site visits, I think those are just things that allow the end user or whoever's writing the check or cutting the PO to see what you're going to put in, or some more FaceTime, right? I think ultimately, like Amy mentioned, we're not in the selling of just technology, we're selling ourselves, right? So I think the site visit really just puts your face right in the customer's face and allows for a stronger relationship from the most fundamental. But I would say that from a demos perspective, we rely on our vendors for a lot of those things. We're definitely not a demo company. We can show off some existing installs and maybe some live graphics of a different facility, but we operate under a lot of NDAs, so we always can't do that either. But we operate primarily just with trying to sell ourselves as opposed to just selling technology.
Yeah. So what about some of the things we talked about earlier today were like cloud, right? Moving everything to the cloud systems, open protocols, smart buildings. How has that impacted, your sales process? Right? Because it's changed over the years, right?
It is. It's kind of funny, like it's starting all over again. When I first started selling Niagara, I showed silos,
right.
farm silos. Right. And of course, in those days, it was BACnet, LineWorks, and Modbus, right? Well, now we have cloud silos again, right? You got the chiller silo, you got the AHU, you got the FTD, you got the occupancy, you got air quality. So we're starting to see these. You could have 50 clouds connect to your system. So we're kind of starting over again. And I think the problem is there's so much noise in the industry right now.
Right.
So all you have to do is keep your head down, find out what the customer really needs, and try to accommodate. Do you accommodate by linking everything together on site and then pushing it to one cloud, right? Or pushing it to your cloud and let everybody else come get it? So I think there's right now is we're cloud enabled. People say that. You have to get into the details with people. I think it was for Jim to say they're going to go cloud. I think that was very good. They put a stake in the ground, right? With BXP. So they put a stake in the ground. There's people like Amazon, business-wise. I'm sorry, not Amazon, but Capital One, who uses they don't have any servers. They don't own them all. They sold them all to Amazon. So everything's cloud-based, and they've talked to us, and we've got some stuff hosted there, but we're talking with our customers about what do you really want, that you want cloud native, or is there going to always be a need for a hybrid system where you're going to need some stuff smart in the building, and where's that borderline going to be for that? So we talk about it. We have great conversations. I will tell you, we're in listening mode now because there's so much going on in the industry. We're trying to listen to SIs.
That's a good point.
Okay, we're listening to end user customers. We allow cloud services. We're building we spent more time and money in the last couple of years building the infrastructure for cloud versus what's in the cloud. There's a million people that are going to build apps in the cloud, but what kind of a pipe do you have? Is it secure? All those sort of things. So we're trying to build that in to make it very easy to do for frankly an SI. How many, the SI to set up systems and do that sort of thing. So
let's go to the SI, right, Chris? Stay with me.
That you're good. So cloud integrations or cloud infrastructure integration, smart buildings, all of those are buzzwords in my opinion. They're all enabling end users to ask the right questions up front. All of those things are just giving the end user more information to be able to criticize your proposal and say, do you meet all these requirements, or how am I getting more benefit out of this? And really it's just opening yourself up to be better salespeople, right? Because you're now going to be able to talk about those things and showcase all of the wonderful technology that we can sell. Again, you want to sell yourself as a person, your company as an integration team, and not just the software.
Right. And everything we've talked about when it comes to smart buildings is about integration, is about data, and the whole 9 yards. So let me ask this. When it comes to like data analytics and some of this other stuff, how do you, because a lot of this stuff are long-term solutions, right? That can prove out an ROI at some point. How do you guys sell that to customers, right? How do you sell integration to customers who really aren't familiar with those type of terms, right? You're talking to someone in the C-suite or someone on the business side. How do you sell the value of integration and data analytics and some of these other applications that go into smart building technology? Who wants to take that one?
I'll start.
Jump.
So first of all, I want to go just back 1 second.
No, go ahead.
When it comes to cloud, I'm going to go off the reservation, all right?
Uh-oh.
Just a little bit. I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to make a statement, and you may agree, you may disagree. You mentioned it a little bit. Is it going to be cloud only? No. It is a hybrid model between device at the edge and the cloud, both working together. So we talk about.
In the seat.
I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees. Anyway, that's where I see it going. And we've got so much data in our buildings today. I mean, we got a data that's, what it tells you how many times Ed sneezed in the building, for goodness sakes. So the question is, what's the right data you need? I haven't heard anybody here talk about, when we talk about data standards. Not one thing. And again, self-plug, Project Haystack, that's a data standard, right? Not for that. But it is, to your point about analytics and stuff, it's being done at the edge or at that device level as well as in the cloud. Now you say, all right, well, is that duplicate? No, you can do the stuff at the edge with the controllers and the power that are in controllers today and the apps that can be put on them, and then just send the pieces of data and information and the insight you want up to the cloud, and then use it up in the cloud. But a lot of that data resides at that device level where it happens in real time. And that's the key, as I see it, is where we're going. And that data needs to be integrated. And the new word for me is interoperable. It's one thing to have your devices and your equipment integrated, no silos anymore. The walls are down. We've got open platforms, et cetera. But it is, how do you make that data from all those different systems and devices interoperable so that anybody who has the authority to look and examine that data is using the same data, it's modeled the same exact way, it's tagged the same way, and everybody is speaking the same language. And then ultimately, again, that data is who owns the data? And it's the owner's building, they own the data. And you hear horror stories out there today of somebody's held a owner hostage because an integrator or somebody, service firm, is owning that data. It's the owner's data. They can do with what they want.
Right. So from an integrator standpoint, Chris?
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
No. Explain how you talk to a client about the long-term value of integration, data analytics, and all this good stuff.
I think at the most fundamental, we have to start with a base project, right? So you kind of, what Marc was talking about, you have to start with data acquisition, data tagging, and data standards, right? And I'm not gonna go, you did a great job, I'm not gonna do any better justice than that. But in my opinion, what we do is we let our customers figure out what they want before they come and talk to us. So if you're an end user, figure out what you want to do with it, work with an engineer, work with a vendor, work with a different software manufacturer, or whatever the case may be, and then come back to us and then tell us what you want. We don't want to influence that too much. We might give you options, but at the end of the day, if you want to put in data analytics package on top of your building automation system or your environmental monitoring system, we're going to let you do that, and you can tell us what you want. I don't want to influence that decision for you because I'm not the one who has to own the data at the end of the day. I'm going to make sure your data's tagged and that it's all readable and actually operable so that someone can read it at some point, but I don't want to push a solution on you if that's not what you're looking for up front.
Right.
Jim made a good comment earlier when he said they design their buildings to be cloud ready.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the key, right?
remember
Are they
that.
cloud ready? How are they going to do that? You know, a lot of people want to throw a gateway in every building, right? So we call them gateway gardens. And so you could have a gateway from a chiller manufacturer. You can have a gateway from, I just saw the air quality, right? So you could literally have 4 or 5 gateways, and they all say, well, we talk back that, which means we can connect everything in the building. Well, this doesn't happen because there's ugly stuff in that boiler room. So those are some of the issues, but it's just making sure that the data that is ready, like you said, pre-tagged, ready to go, and it's sitting there. And whether you're going to use MQTT or a REST API to push it to a cloud, you can do that. Like I said, I think there's going to be these really great applications out there like we run today on premise. It can run in the cloud. But as Marc said, even with AI models, the large language models are definitely going to run in the cloud. But we're already looking at with N5 is the small language models running on premise.
Absolutely.
Okay? And then the micro language models running at the controller level. So this is all going to change because what people are going to find out is to send that data to the cloud, you pay a toll. And it's a big toll to move that data. And I've even had data firms, some of the big data firms tell me, my gosh, internally I'm getting billed by my own data center because how much data I'm throwing up there. So you got to be very careful what data is going to go north.
So is this something that you address with owners when they're talking about moving things to the cloud, or you're talking about a new project?
We listen and say, okay, I'm working with this particular product. Can you help us get the data there? And we say, of course. So then we talk about, okay, what's the best way for us to format the data when it leaves, let's say, the premise.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways to do that now, and people are doing it many different ways. So that's the key, is making sure it's still got to be right. And I love the fact that Boston Properties brought up the fact they couldn't do anything with their energy management or FDD till they fixed the dampers. I don't know if anybody heard that. I heard it.
Yeah.
And they had a guy sitting in the equipment with the dampers right there. I said, thank God. And I was thinking of Paul Oswald, who's been saying that for years. If the damper doesn't work, you can have the best cloud AI, and hopefully it tells you the damper's broken, but it might not. So we tell people is you have to understand what the issues are, and again, you have to advise them or get somebody on your team that can help advise them what's the best way to work with this.
And also, you mentioned it, the toll gate for the data.
Yeah.
Some solutions, you're paying it twice. Send it up and then send it back, and you're paying it twice for the same data. So be careful on that.
So the common theme I've been hearing is collaboration, right? Collaboration. So if you're talking to a sales team, right, or some of the people out here, what advice would you give them on how to become better salespeople when it comes to technical sales, collaboration, and things like that?
I'll just jump in and to add to what Ed was saying. The more we have our customers cram stuff up into the cloud, the more data centers they have to build, the more business that is for all of us. So that's the self-licking ice cream cone there. So we're all for it. Understanding your customer's appetite for that information from a field device perspective, we have the ability to collect a ton of information. We're sending it all back to your controllers, to the brains as we call them. And sometimes they want that information, sometimes they don't. But when it comes to selling it, I always say I'd rather see you be future-proof, be ready, as opposed to design a building that's already 20 years old, right? And so you're bringing something new out of the ground. Why not, at least? You might not have the appetite for that data today, or you might not have the AI software to take all that and make it into something meaningful. That doesn't mean that software won't be there for you tomorrow. So you better start collecting that information, or having the capability to collect it via sensors or valve position or actuator position or IP, whatever that is. Like, be ready to be adaptable going forward instead of having to have a massive retrofit on your hands in short order.
So the key word
That
is
helps you make
future-proof.
better informed decisions going
Exactly.
forward.
Yeah, future proofing, we call it.
Yeah. How about you, Amy?
As it
Good
relates to collaboration. So one of the things, we're always a how can we company, how can we provide a solution for somebody? So if we're bringing a solution that's brand new to our execution team, bringing them in early into that, having them have buy-in, letting them do a site walk with us, making sure that we're all on the same page helps us execute better, make sure that we, actually deliver on the promises that the sales team is making. And I think doing that helps build a better team in the long term.
So team and culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. How about you, Chris?
I think, just speaking from my personal experience, what made me a better salesperson, or I guess better Rovisys salesperson, was starting from the field, right? So being the person in the field to understand everything that's being sold from start to finish, and then how to go apply exactly what you're selling or what your company's strategy is to another project or another solution. I can't stress that enough. I think coming from the outside world and trying to be a BAS salesperson in today's day and age has to be remarkably difficult if you've never done it. I would actually deem it, all aspects of it would be nearly impossible to learn, I think, without doing it from start to finish. And I think that there are definitely different ways to mitigate that. So one of the things that we do with sales folks is we try to get them ingrained in our engineering teams. If they can't be in the field, then let them go be, one of the 350 hours that they sold on site to go put the commissioning in, right? It's like, well, this is actually gonna be 3,000, so that sucks. I think just trying to be as collaborative as possible and try to bring that sales to engineering gap to a minimum.
Yeah. How about you, Marc?
I think it's all about collaboration. And BAS has evolved from a product sell to a solution sell.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it is, as providers, it is putting together the best solution based on the input that one has established, outcomes, what the client is looking for, all of that. And I don't think today, even though there are some folks that may say, oh yeah, we do it all, I don't think there's anybody who does it all. And especially if you're selling a solution versus a product. So,
starting a career, I think collaboration starts with getting out and meeting people. I encourage everybody to join the local ASHRAE chapter.
Yeah.
Okay, there's not as much of that going on anymore. But I mean, when you go there, you're going to be meeting with consulting engineers, with owners, with other vendors. I mean, frankly, I just came upon a project where it was very obvious that the vendor for the air handling unit and the controls person never had a conversation. And it was a total disaster because they didn't know each other. So if you don't meet them at the consulting engineer, you can meet them at an ASHRAE meeting, have a chat. People don't get on the phone and talk about, coordinating a lot anymore.
We're in the people business.
Yes. So I think it starts, and ASHRAE is as close as you can get. Now, what I really like is also the BIG, the Building Intelligence Group, chapters that are going throughout the U.S., where they're taking it to the next level. That's where they're talking about cloud and talking about AI and those sort of things that they don't typically talk about at ASHRAE. So I think and then there's events like this, ControlsCon, right? So we have to let our sales teams collaborate with people and meet with them. Also, big companies need to let their sales teams get together more often. Everybody has a sales kickoff. Well, sales reps can teach other sales reps. So even if you're in the same company, there needs to be some more collaboration, I think, there. So I think you can learn from each other. You can learn from mistakes, learn from the successes. But I'm really glad to see, like I said, the BIG group, but I think we still have to fall back to these ASHRAE meetings because we're still working in buildings, we're still working with valves, we're still working with dampers to make buildings smart. And maybe you need to go on over to some of the other meetings like the electrical groups. Where do the fire alarm sales reps meet, right? Do they go to ASHRAE? Probably not, but they're going somewhere. They're probably going to the IEEE meeting in town.
Or cybersecurity
organizations, those sort of things. So I think we have to start doing those types of things locally to do that. So.
Was that a shameless plug, Chris?
Nothing wrong with that. If there's one in Richmond,
I missed it. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, that wasn't as slick as I thought. So Chris, let's start at the end here. And I probably should have asked this in the beginning, but it's not a bad way to kind of close things out. Give me 3 characteristics, and you can go into it as much as you like, of a good BAS salesperson. And I'm going to go down the line. I want each one of you to answer that
Yeah,
question.
great interview question, Greg.
You know anything about cybersecurity?
I do, yeah.
Come and join this organization.
Yeah.
I would say responsiveness, number one, right?
Yeah.
So that, always answer the phone, get back to people. People want to know, if you don't have their answer immediately, at least acknowledge that they've sent you a question. I think that's a huge part. If you got to look something up, I try to say, hey, I don't have it for you right now, but I'm working on it. And when do you need it by? Get their expectation for a response. That's big. Responsiveness, collaboration. To draw on a topic we just touched on, the networking thing is huge, because the more you stay connected with people and individuals, the more you'll begin to hear about things and become connected to projects and get information in bits and pieces, and know questions to ask to your the people you're collaborating with to paint a bigger picture and to understand what your strategy is going to be. So responsiveness is huge, collaboration is huge, and then if I had to pick a third thing, just being that trusted advisor, that honesty piece, not always trying to upsell, but understanding customers' needs and trying to get not maybe what's the best solution for my bottom line, for my number, but for them.
For the customer.
So they're gonna draw on me the next time they need something.
Give you a call for anything OT.
I appreciate you letting me go first too, because I'm sure this will get increasingly harder.
Right.
We have a question from the field. Mitch Reed, go ahead. Customer lunches are a huge part of all of that.
How about you, Amy?
I think.
Give me 3 if you can.
Yeah, totally. Drive to find the right solution. Drive to be your customer's trusted advisor. You need to be able to understand their business and find the right solution that fits for them. So you need to have drive there. Like Chris was saying earlier, you need to have some technical aptitude. I think it's really hard to just take any salesperson, let's say a cold caller, and put them in a building automation role is probably near impossible.
That's tough.
So technical aptitude and I guess just resilience potentially. You need to have resilience and the fact that you are going to have hard jobs, that you're going to have failure and need to keep going.
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
I'm going to echo some of those. The first being responsiveness. I don't like having to ask someone if they responded to an email. Like, if there's someone working with me and they got an email from a customer, I don't want to have to 2 days later be like, hey, did we respond to that? Like, no, I know we responded to it. So that's probably the first thing, is responsiveness and taking care of the end user. I would say, be a human being. I know that sounds crazy. Like, get to know your customer, because they're more than the 8 hours a day they spend at the office or in the plant or whatever they're doing, right? They're human beings. They have wives and husbands and dogs and families and hobbies, and go get to know them. Like, that makes you a really good salesperson. And be friends with them. Like, that's totally okay. You can be friends with your customers. They were a bunch of them, right? And I guess the last one would just be trustworthy. I guess that's kind of a combination of those things, but be prepared to tell them when you don't have the solution, but someone else does, right? Or this is definitely not something we have or we can offer, but I know somebody that can, and yes, they're a direct competitor to us, or here's a vendor that we don't normally work with that I know sells that, or whatever the case may be.
Right. It comes back to the relationships that you've developed, right?
Yeah.
Within the network. So how about you, Mark?
All right, I'll give you my 3.
Give me a 3.
First and foremost, well, no, they're not in any order, sorry. Be adaptable. And I'll leave it at that. Number 2, have no fear. Number 3, know when to say no, that this project, this opportunity is not a right fit for my solutions, my company, or whatever. There you go.
Was that 2?
That's 3.
That's 3.
Adaptable, no fear,
Long day,
and
man.
know when to
asleep. He didn't hear.
I know, and know when to say no. I mean, come on, man. I thought you were my friend,
It's your turn, Ed.
Look, they've said it all. I will say, by having all these characteristics, you can get yourself out of a jam. And I'm going to
Yeah.
tell somebody how I got in a jam one time many, many years ago. Probably
this
in
is
the
good,
80s,
yeah.
we were doing some very sophisticated DDC stuff. And I worked with an engineer. We thought we could write a sequence that it was actually doable. Well, we found out it just really wasn't doable, or it was doable, but it was not going to be, it was predicting ice and how you make ice and when you do
Ice
it. with
storage and all
control.
that good stuff, yeah.
Right. And it wasn't reliable. So I had to go to my buddy, who I'd worked with for many years. We had a relationship back and forth that we trusted each other. And I said, look, this is just not going to work. We have to punt. I said, and I got to tell you, we just, our people telling me what we thought would work well probably has these issues, thermodynamically and all that. And he said, okay, have you got a solution? And we said, yes, we do. Here it is. And he said, that's fine. I trust you. So sometimes you have to just be totally honest and say, this is just, we could have thrown it in there, and a year after the warranty, things would have gone screwy, and
You'd have got paid for
we both
service.
would have got, but we both would have got yelled at. I said, Jack, we just can't do this. This is what I think we should do. And if we have to take a bite and give the owner money back, he said, no, we don't need to do that. We just need to give them a working system. So all these, characteristics build up to the fact that you will be successful if you take care of your customer. I think all of them you said, the honesty in particular, and being knowledgeable. I will say that sales reps today are not as knowledgeable as they should be. And I know it's tough because you got all these different products you have to sell, but you also need to understand the industry. You need to know how an air handling unit works, right? You need to know how does a chill water system work? What are some of the issues there? You've got to take the time to understand the technology behind what we sell, right? So that's the one thing. And then that gets you that credibility that you need.
Kind of goes back to what Chris said, become friends with your customers so you can have those tough conversations.
And then or have, sometimes you have tough conversations. With the first time I went and saw a customer, he remembered who the sales rep for Honeywell was 2 sales reps back. And he said how he hated his guts. And I'm sitting there saying, well, does that mean I should just go ahead and leave? He said, no, I'm going to give you a chance. But I'm saying sometimes you can get people that say, I don't allow Honeywell in my specs because I hated such and such.
Yeah.
And
I work for a manufacturer. And that happened
exactly.
To me.
So those, you have to be able to, that's where you have to have the thick skin too, to be able to do that. But you also have to be able to say, is that going to keep us from working together going forward? So,
Absolutely.
So that's okay.
So we've got about 5 minutes. That was great stuff, guys. We got about 5 minutes for questions. Anybody got a question? Or am I going to have to hand someone a microphone? Well, let me ask you this. Takeaways. What takeaway did you have? Yeah, you. Aaron. Ooh. Any takeaways from the entire hour and a half that these people just spoke?
I thought it was fantastic. You guys all did a great job, and I've definitely been following Ed, and I know Chris, he's my sales rep, and you guys do a fantastic job, and I appreciate it.
Anyone else have a takeaway? Scott?
Well, I have a question. All of you are experienced. All of you have had success. I'd like each one of you to share with us one of your own personal failures as a salesperson. And Ed shared one. Well, he didn't share one, but you guys all succeed. So tell us sometime like where you screwed up and how you screwed up. I mean, I can tell you some
volunteer.
of mine.
Just one.
I have a
Yeah,
good
just
one.
one.
Can I ask Don to leave the room real quick?
Involved in some of mine.
Can I just ask you to step out, earmuffs?
I'm gonna go first, Chris.
Yeah. No, Amy sounds like she
I'll
has
go.
one.
I have one.
Yeah.
I was working more as a technician, doing a few different roles, and I went in and told the customer that I could update their Jaces. I was like, I'll just get you to the newest version. No big deal. Should take me about 4 hours. I got done, but all of the N2 devices just started falling off the network. It took
Yikes.
weeks with JCI to figure out that they didn't really have a very good answer for me. It did get me a full building retrofit, but I screwed up first. I thought that was going to work, and I thought I was going to set them up for success, and I did not.
Nice.
Anything else?
Who else
anybody
wants to come
admit?
clean?
No, I'll give one, even though Don.
He said one. I'll give one.
Unless you all have Cochran, if you have a bigger one that I screwed up, you're welcome to share that too. I I've mismeasured, some retrofits. We offer custom retrofit solutions, and being mildly afraid of heights, 30 feet up on a scissor lift, strapped in with my calipers, hands shaking. I've botched some measurements and given people linkages that do not fit a valve to put an actuator on top.
Not a big deal. Come on,
It can be
Chris.
when it's a critical application.
Yeah,
Think
yeah.
to me, Scott, that's what matters. So, yeah, or somebody sends you something expecting you to maybe process an order for them, and it just gets missed. And you got to own it. You can't. The second you get into lying or trying to make up some story, that it just gets
snowballing.
spirals. Yeah,
Starts
it's
snowballing.
totally spirals. So I always just fall on the sword, take your medicine, and just try to move on.
Okay, we've got time for what? Anybody else?
I'll give you one.
Yeah,
So
fess up, Mark.
I will fess up. So fairly large client who will remain nameless, got the opportunity for a really nice upgrade project in their facilities to the tune of $500,000, give or take. I forget how many Jaces, Niagara, and ancillaries, whatever. So we spec'd it out, and I completely relied on my spec team at that time to spec how many devices, how many this, whatever. Give it to me. I go in there, here you go. We had the conversation. They looked at me. Are you sure? We got a number license, number devices. Yes, we're good. All right, we get installed, and did we get the F-bomb? Boy, and I had to figure that out. What am I gonna do? And again, trying to be that trusted advisor. We ate it, or I ate it, let's put it that way. But the point is that, again, goes back to one of the three things. No fear, and don't worry about the mistakes. You learn something. I learned something, not to trust this guy, but that's beside. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. Any other questions? We got time for one more.
You need another failure?
I can also give an easy failure.
Check my app for failures, right? Yeah.
We have access to an open version of a proprietary line of software for a significantly large
Feels
scale
like an
version.
intervention now.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
might
really.
be Siemens who said that. Paul did. Yeah, shocking. Might be Siemens, and I 100% told a customer with 164 Siemens controllers that we could just flash them all to BACnet with the software that we had, and we can't. So we learned that the hard way, and now we don't do that anymore. So don't do that.
So I guess at the end of the day, being trustworthy, having accountability is huge when it comes to trying to be someone's trusted advisor.
Amen.
All right. So with that, I'd like to thank each one of our panelists. I really, really do appreciate it. Give these guys a round of applause. This has been great.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank y'all.
So the next session is going to start in exactly 5 minutes.